Story 1. Driving through Washington State, rattling of the cabin in the dead of night. From Redditor user I Collect the Dead, and I was driving through eastern Washington on some state roads. There were no rest stops or cities, but I had done the route enough to know there were these massive dirt areas every 40 miles where you could park safely away from the road. I decided to call it a night and closed my blinds and laid down to watch something on my phone. After roughly an hour, I hear someone try to open the driver's side door. I haven't heard any vehicles on the road the whole time I'm parked, but I get up to peek out the curtains. As I'm looking out into the blackness of the driver's side window, I hear them try the passenger side door. I peek down from the top of the curtain, but can't see anything, so I start the truck and kick on the lights. I'm fairly freaked out at this point, so I'm still not opening the curtains but peeking through gaps. Nothing. Nobody is standing near either of my doors or parked within sight line. I take a deep breath and close the sleeper curtains too, because for some reason that's going to make things better, right? After laying back down and convincing myself that something blew against the truck, and it only sounded like the doors, it was fairly windy outside and a lot of flat ground. I hear what sounds like someone trying to pry open the vents on the sleeper. The door handles start clicking again and the truck starts shifting like someone is climbing on it. I hit the little alarm button in the sleeper, hoping to spook them off, but it does nothing but add to the noise of door handles, fingers tapping on windows and chassis, and the hiss of air coming out of the suspension. Then suddenly it stops. A few moments where I can only hear myself breathing and my heart pounding before I hear another truck approach and then drive by. I spent the next few hours waiting for whatever it was to come back, but it never did. In the morning, I couldn't find any footprints or damage to my truck, but on every window were tiny human-looking handprints, like a toddler had licked their hand and stuck it to my window over and over. Story 2 pulls off the road during hailstorm. Grinning man pushed up against window. From Redditor user RubyRed33GT. I've spent the past 4 years driving every day night for work. I was in a fairly rural part of Mississippi somewhere between Clarksdale and Greenwood. Important note, it's all two-lane highway, the 250-mile drive home. The weather had turned pretty sour as I was leaving Clarksdale. I called my wife, told her there was high wind advisories and very possible tornado threats throughout the Delta, and I'd call her as soon as I made it to a safe area again. I had already been working for 14 hours when I got in the truck, so I had ate dinner and grabbed some coffee to stay awake and alert. Now, if you've never driven through flat farmland at night for 100 miles, it's very fatiguing and spooky without inclement weather. I had driven maybe 30 miles out into the farmland when hail started bouncing off my truck. Being a MS native, I knew in July hail meant tornado. I pull off to the side. I'm in the middle of nowhere. No lights to be seen, no cars behind or in front of me, and start looking for the storm tornado I believe is approaching. I rolled the passenger window down and shined a bright flashlight off into the night. Nothing there. Turned to the driver's side and this guy has his face pushed against the glass, grinning from ear to ear. I screamed and he was gone. I slammed the truck and drive and took off. We have all the time running cameras on our trucks. I got to the first safe place to stop and called my wife. I didn't want to scare her, so I didn't mention the guy or the hailstorm. I did, however, pull the SD card and check the cameras. I promise you this guy never popped up on my front or rear cameras. I've always played it off as my imagination. I will say I don't drive through the Delta in the dark anymore if I don't absolutely have to. Story 3. Driving through rural Tennessee. Mullet man in the middle of nowhere. From Redditor user Pen Bandit. Around 2006-ish, I was driving flatbed. Picked up a load of construction material. Drywall, roofing, don't remember. But it was pre-packaged in boxes and I remember having to use strap protectors on the load. In rural Tennessee, memory is foggy now, but I want to say it was between Memphis and Nashville, but closer to the intersection of the MS-AL-TN state lines. Tarp required, so I strapped everything down, tarped the load, and left the shipper. About 5 miles down the road, in the middle of nowhere, woods on a 2-lane road, I noticed my tarp flapping in the wind. Found a wide shoulder and pulled over to fix it. I realized that I just flat did a crappy job tarping this load and decided to redo it on the side of the road. Undo all the bungee straps, drag the tarps off, roll them back up, climb up on the load and start unrolling the tarps again, and I see a guy walking down the same side of the road I'm on, coming towards my truck. I don't think anything about it other than to keep an eye on him because I'm in the middle of nowhere and continue what I'm doing. About the time I have tarps set in place and am climbing down to start hooking the bungee straps back on, this dude is getting close enough that I'm now paying more attention to him than I am to tarping my load. I grab my winch bar and set it on the trailer where I'm working, just in case. 8-pound solid metal bar about 4 feet long, tapered to a blunt point on one and in hollow on the other, used for tightening straps and chains, etc. The guy gets to me, and the first thing I notice is his hair. It's like a mullet, but it's patchy as fuck. Like he tried to cut his own hair and said, "Fuck it, good enough to party." The next thing I noticed were his eyes, which I can only describe as off. Like they were clear. I didn't think he was drunk or high or anything, but it also gave me the distinct impression that the elevator didn't go all the way up. Clothes were dirty and not well maintained, with dirty white tennis shoes, because I remember he didn't have laces on one shoe and the tongue was noticeably out of place. He stops by me, waits until I acknowledge him, and just says, "I've got a long walk." I'm like, "Yeah, man, you do. We're in the middle of nowhere." Making it clear there's no ride to be had here. He nods, starts walking by me, continuing on his way, stops at about the driver door on my truck and turns around, comes back to me and repeats himself. "I've got a long walk." At this point, I explain that I can't give him a ride, insurance and all that. Apologize for not being able to help him out, and he seems to accept this, turns around and leaves. I wait for him to get a little ways away from my truck and start working on finishing the tarp job. I still keep an eye on him, and he's moving away from me. As I'm putting on the last of the bungee straps, I look over to check where he's at, and he's turned around, heading back towards me, now about 100 yards in front of my truck and coming back my way. It looks like he's talking on a cell phone, has his hand up to his face, and I can barely make out his mouth moving, his other hand waving like he's having a conversation with someone. I finish with the straps, grab my winch bar, and am climbing into my truck as he's about 10 yards away now. Soon as I'm in the cab, I lock the doors and set the winch bar on the passenger seat just in case. I look at the guy and realize he's not talking on a phone, he's talking to his freaking hand. And now I'm nervous, because he doesn't look like he's having a nice, pleasant chat. It looks more like an angry conversation. Crank the truck up, put it in gear, and just pull out, didn't look for traffic or anything. As I pass him, he's just looking at me, still holding his hand to his face with this dead-ass look on his face, just staring at me. Gave me the creeps. About the time I hit 5th or 6th gear, I look in the mirror and there's no one there. Story 4. Driving along the Sea of Cortez, tailing lights go off cliff, start flying. From Redditor user Aratark. As a crew guy of an off-road racing team in Baja California, Mexico, I got to test drive some rigs and trucks, so technically truck driver. We were driving down south along Sea of Cortez with a buddy at night at this 4-hour dirt road to Gonzaga, which is pretty much in the middle of freaking nowhere in the desert, and we see the lights of a car behind coming down fast, and now effectively tailing us, and the bastard had bar-mount headlights on top, or what seemed like it, which are super bright. It's normal, or was, that locals get wasted in the nearest spring breaker town and then go down this road super fast to test their rigs, since there's no police there. So I try waving him off to get the guy to keep them lights low since he's blinding us, but he isn't slowing down a bit, nor turn his roof lights off, and it was a dangerous, super dark road. Finally, near a curve near the shore, I found a spot to bail off the road without crashing, and we see lights passing by us super fast and going straight to the curve. We were like, that's it, he is going to crash down to the sea. But the lights didn't fall and kept going straight into the beach and the sea, and then pitched up abruptly to the night sky and disappeared. We didn't say a word for a minute or so, and then my buddy goes, "Did you see it?" And I say, "The fucking flying truck?" Didn't talk about it anymore, as simply it didn't make sense to talk about it, or with anyone else when we arrived.